So most of us are taught from like a really young age to be absolutely terrified of failing. But when you actually look at the math on human regret, and this is something that always gets me, the thing that destroys us, the thing that really keeps people up at night at the very end of their lives, it isn't trying something and crashing. It's the quiet, exhausting tragedy of just sitting in the waiting room of your own life.
Yeah, wow, the waiting room. It is the ultimate illusion of safety, right? We convince ourselves that if we just wait a little bit longer, the perfect opportunity will arrive. Or we wait for motivation to suddenly strike, or for someone to just finally recognize our potential and hand us the keys. But as the materials we are diving into today make abundantly clear, that waiting room is a complete trap. I mean, unrealized potential is a far heavier burden than failure ever could be.
Right. And that is exactly the nerve we are hitting today. So we're pulling insights from two really compelling sources for this deep dive. We've got excerpts from the Victory with Ash, Master Knowledge Base version 1.0, and also The Decision to Rise, a blueprint for transformation. And our mission here is to dissect the transformational power of a single definitive choice. The choice to stop waiting and, as the texts call it, to rise.
Exactly. And we should probably be super clear right up front. So this isn't about adopting another complicated, 3-hour morning routine or hyping yourself up in the mirror with empty affirmations. The core thesis across both of these documents is that meaningful growth, real growth, does not begin with a flawless, risk-free plan. And it definitely doesn't begin with a sudden surge of unshakable confidence. It begins with a structural shift in how you view your own agency.
A shift in agency.
Right. It's a definitive decision to just stop outsourcing your progress to external circumstances.
Which, okay, that brings up something I really want to chew on for a second. Because the text introduces this concept that responsibility creates power. And look, on the surface, that sounds like a great bumper sticker, right? But let's look at the actual underlying mechanics of that. When we talk about a mindset shift from victimhood, where you're asking, why is this happening to me, to responsibility, where you ask, what can I do about it? What is literally happening psychologically there? Because, I mean, it feels like more than just a change in attitude. It feels like a literal shift in energy.
Oh, it is a literal shift, specifically regarding what psychologists call your locus of control. So when you're in a victim mindset, your locus of control is entirely external. You believe the world is just acting upon you. And when you operate that way, your brain essentially goes into power-saving mode. It says, well, we have no control here, so let's just shut down and endure it.
Oh, interesting. So it breeds paralysis.
100%. It breeds total paralysis. But the moment you ask, what can I do about it? What you pull that locus of control internally, you are literally forcing your brain to switch from a passive endurance mode into an active problem-solving mode.
Okay, I hear you, but let me introduce a little friction here.
Yeah.
Because let's be real, when you've just been laid off because of a massive market crash, or, you're dealing with a systemic issue, or just profound, objectively terrible luck, being told to take responsibility can feel, well, borderline insulting.
Yeah, it can sound like toxic positivity.
Exactly. Toxic positivity. How does the text bridge the gap between acknowledging real grief or like uncontrollable disasters and forcing yourself to move forward? I mean, isn't it a bit naive to tell someone to take responsibility for a storm they didn't even create?
That is probably the most important distinction to make with this entire framework. And to be fair, the source material tackles this head-on. The texts are not claiming that you control the universe or the economy or what other people do. Taking responsibility is absolutely not the same as taking the blame. You might not be at fault for the storm, but you are 100% responsible for building the shelter.
Building the shelter. So it's about responsibility.
Yeah.
Literally the ability to respond.
That is the core of it, yeah. You cannot control a market crash, but you can entirely control your skill acquisition, right? You can control your daily habits, the way you treat the people around you, your attitude, your effort. Focusing your mental bandwidth on what you can't control just physically drains your agency. It generates complete helplessness. But focusing intensely on what you can control, that is what actually generates power.
Right.
That narrowing of focus, ignoring all the uncontrollable noise, and just optimizing your own actions, that's the essence of the RISES principle.
I really love that clarification because, yeah, if I am caught in a storm out at sea, getting angry at the clouds doesn't actually help me survive. I don't control the wind, but I do control the sails. So, okay, let's say you make that shift. You take the wheel. You take ownership of the sails. You're now responsible. The terrifying part is that now, well, if the boat sinks, it's entirely on you. The safety net of having a convenient excuse is totally gone.
Right, which is precisely the moment most people just sprint back to the waiting room. They take the wheel, they feel the sheer weight of that responsibility, and they freeze up. And then they tell themselves a very, very convincing lie. They say, I'll start driving as soon as I feel confident. But the second major principle from the blueprint dismantles that completely. It flat out states that courage comes before confidence.
Yes. This is where we really have to talk about the cognitive block of waiting for readiness. We treat confidence like it's a prerequisite, like it's a downloaded software update that has to finish installing before we can launch the program.
Oh, that's a perfect way to put it. And that specific misunderstanding is responsible for so many abandoned dreams. People try to manufacture confidence through, excessive information gathering.
Oh, yeah, the endless research phase.
Exactly. They spend years researching the perfect business plan, watching endless YouTube tutorials, trying to map out literally every possible failure point. They're basically trying to guarantee success up front so they won't have to feel afraid. But the text points out that confidence isn't a prerequisite at all. It's a lagging indicator.
Wait, a lagging indicator. So it only shows up after the data has been collected, like after the action has actually been taken.
Yes. Think about, any great leader or a highly successful public speaker. Every single one of them was once standing behind a podium for the very first time, hands shaking, heart racing, feeling entirely like a complete imposter. They didn't step on that stage because they felt confident. They stepped on it because they had courage.
Right, because courage is defined as taking action in the presence of fear, not in the absence of it.
Exactly. Your brain only learns that a situation is safe, which is really what confidence actually is after you have survived doing it. You have to be willing to be bad at something before you can ever earn the confidence of being good at it.
It's basically forced habituation. If you avoid the uncomfortable thing, your brain just continues to flag it as a mortal threat. But if you do the uncomfortable thing, speaking up in that meeting, publishing that messy first draft, your brain realizes, oh, wait, I didn't die. So the next time, the fear is dialed down 10%, which leads naturally into the text's assertion that growth begins outside the comfort zone. Comfort is basically the enemy of this entire framework.
Comfort is a silent killer of potential. Totally. But here's where we need to look at the larger architecture of transformation, because relying on raw courage every single day, that is exhausting. If we just tell someone, hey, be brave and do things that scare you every single day, they might manage it for, a week?
Yeah, the classic New Year's resolution phenomenon. We sprint as hard as we can for 5 days and then completely collapse.
Right. They get a momentary burst of motivation, do one terrifying thing, and then burn out completely. And that burnout is exactly why motivation is a terrible long-term strategy. This is where the VictoryWithAsh core philosophy introduces a really vital mechanism. The master knowledge base states something super fascinating about failure. It argues that most people do not fail because they lack intelligence, and they don't fail because they lack opportunity. They actually suffer from what it calls the implementation gap.
I really want to visualize this implementation gap for a second, because it feels like a car engine that is just revving in neutral. You're consuming all this high-octane fuel-like, you're listening to deep dives, reading the books, absorbing all these complex strategies. The engine is roaring. It sounds super impressive. But because the transmission isn't actually engaged, because there is no real structure or accountability, there's zero forward momentum. Information without implementation is, it's essentially just intellectual entertainment.
That is a perfect mechanical analogy. We are all just drowning in information overload. We know what to do, but we lack the environment and the structured system to actually execute it consistently. Transformation only happens when learning becomes action, and then that action solidifies into habit. So to engage that transmission, the text details a 3-pillar framework: rise, reset, and refocus. We've already explored rise, which is taking radical responsibility and choosing action over excuses.
Okay, so what are the actual mechanics of the second pillar, reset?
So reset is a deliberate, necessary realignment. It's the process of actively identifying and removing the limiting beliefs and destructive habits that are creating drag on your life.
Like cognitive friction.
Exactly, cognitive friction. Limiting beliefs act as predictive coding in your brain. If your internal narrative is constantly predicting that you aren't good enough or that a project is definitely going to fail, your brain naturally withholds the energy need to execute it. You are literally fighting your own psychological programming. You cannot build a better, elevated future while carrying all the heavy, rotting baggage of the habits that created your current problems in the first place. A reset clears that friction.
You have to demolish the cracked foundation before you can pour a new one. Makes sense. And then the third pillar is refocus, which sounds like it tackles the whole modern attention economy.
It absolutely does. Refocusing is about recognizing that your attention is actually your most valuable currency. Modern life is just this endless, sophisticated barrage of distractions designed to steal that currency from you. So, refocusing means ruthlessly eliminating those distractions, prioritizing meaningful goals, and developing deep discipline. Because ultimately, where your attention goes, your results inevitably follow.
Okay, let me pause and synthesize this, because if I am listening to this right now, I might be feeling a rising sense of panic.
Yeah.
Like, I realize I'm stuck in the waiting room. Now I'm being told I need to rise and take radical responsibility, then reset my entire psychological foundation, drop all my bad habits, and then refocus, block out all modern distractions, and find a mentor. That doesn't just sound hard. It sounds like a recipe for a total psychological breakdown.
Mm.
How does an ordinary, exhausted person actually start this process without getting completely paralyzed by the sheer scale of the overhaul?
It's a very valid concern, and it's one the Victory framework actually anticipates and solves for. If you try to overhaul your entire identity by tomorrow morning, you will fail. The system will just crash. This brings us to a really crucial mechanism in the text. Small decisions create big futures. The architecture of major transformation does not rely on massive superhuman leaps. It relies on incredibly small, manageable choices compounded over time.
Okay, let's get incredibly specific with that, because small decisions can sound a little vague. What does that actually look like in practice? Is it about bypassing the brain's threat response?
Yes, exactly. The source material provides a brilliant, very tangible example. Reading just 10 pages of a book a day. Now, your brain does not view reading 10 pages as a massive, exhausting threat. It doesn't trigger that fight or flight response that a major life overhaul does. But engaging in that tiny action daily changes your trajectory far more effectively than, say, hyping yourself up to read an entire textbook in one sitting once a year and then abandoning the effort entirely.
Right, it's the compounding interest of personal development.
It really is.
Yeah.
The Victory framework doesn't demand immediate, flawless perfection. In fact, it focuses heavily on just the first 30 to 90 days as a pure foundation-building phase. The expected outcomes for those first 3 months aren't become a millionaire or achieve total enlightenment. The outcomes are much more grounded. It's about reduced daily stress, a slight increase in confidence, better clarity in goal setting, and incrementally stronger habits.
Which makes the process feel so much more accessible rather than intimidating. And from what I gather in the text, this very grounded, incremental approach is deeply rooted in the background of Ash Mukhari himself.
Yeah, the text highlights his background specifically to show that he didn't build massive, successful organizations through, like, chaotic, burnout-inducing hustle culture. He built them on a bedrock of simple, steadfast values: faith, family, integrity, and daily personal responsibility. The philosophy emphasizes that success is not just about financial or status markers. It becomes truly meaningful when it's grounded in service to others and strong ethical values. And you don't build that kind of character by overhauling your life overnight. You build it by becoming a dependable, action-taking person, one mundane day at a time.
Okay, so bridging the gap between these philosophical frameworks and the immediate practical reality of the person listening right now. Because the true test of this deep dive isn't how inspired you feel while the audio is playing, it's what you actually do the moment it ends. How do the sources suggest we apply this to our daily lives?
Well, the practical applications provided in the text are very straightforward. In your career, rising means applying for that opportunity, that new role, or that promotion, even if you only meet, say, 60% of the criteria. Let them be the ones to tell you no. Stop rejecting yourself on their behalf. In business, it means launching that product or service while it's still messy, because perfection is just a defensive illusion designed to prevent progress.
And what about the personal sphere? Because being stuck isn't always just about money or your career.
Absolutely. In relationships, it means taking the initiative. Stop waiting for the other person to reach out first, or to apologize first, or to plan the connection. Take ownership of the dynamic. In your health, it means beginning with the simplest possible micro habit, like just drinking a glass of water every morning, rather than purchasing some complex, intense fitness program that you'll inevitably abandon by Wednesday.
I want to introduce a thought experiment here, pulling directly from the reflection questions in the blueprint. If you are listening to this, don't just let these questions wash over you as background noise. Actually pause and confront them. First, what is the specific area of your life that currently requires you to rise? Like, where you knowingly playing small? Second, what is the primary go-to excuse you have been using repeatedly to justify staying in that waiting room? And third, look objectively at your current daily habits. If you change absolutely nothing about your routine, What kind of future are you mathematically guaranteed to create?
Wow. Yeah, confronting those questions creates the necessary friction for change. And to ensure that friction actually translates into reality, the source material lays out a very clear 5-step action plan to implement immediately. So, step 1, identify that one specific area in your life where you have been lingering in the waiting room. Step 2, write down the decision you need to make. The physical act of putting it on paper moves it from a vague feeling to a concrete target. Step 3, take one action toward that decision within the next 24 hours.
I really want to emphasize that 24-hour window because there is a psychological concept called the law of diminishing intent. Basically, if you don't take action on an idea within 24 hours, your brain files it away as a fantasy, and the probability of you ever doing it drops to near zero. So that one action, even if it's just sending a single email, making a quick phone call, or reading those 10 pages,
Yeah.
is absolutely crucial to lock in the momentum.
That is such a vital psychological mechanism to understand. Moving to step 4, actively replace your excuses with solutions. When your brain reflexively says, I don't have the time for this, you must consciously intercept that thought and reply with, how can I restructure my day to find 10 minutes? It's about retraining your brain's default response from defense to strategy. And finally, step 5, repeat this small action daily until it hardens into a habit.
So bringing all of this together, we've navigated a lot of complex terrain today. From shifting our locus of control to completely escape the waiting room, to understanding that courage must precede confidence, and utilizing the implementation gap to turn raw information into actual progress.
Yeah, and if we synthesize the absolute core message of these sources, it is really this. Transformation is never an accident. It is not a lottery ticket, and it is never going to spontaneously happen to you while you wait. Transformation is a conscious, courageous decision. It is the choice to move beyond the safety of your excuses and step into the discomfort of possibility. I mean, every meaningful achievement in human history started with someone who was likely terrified, who felt entirely unready, but who decided to take radical responsibility for their future anyway.
I want to leave you with a final thought to really turn over in your mind today. Your future is not some distant, abstract destination. It is currently being built, brick by the exact habits and decisions you engaged in today. So consider this. If your entire life 5 years from now was entirely determined by what you did in the last 24 hours, wait, no, let me rephrase that. If your entire life 5 years from now was determined by what you did today, would you be thrilled with where you end up, or would you be terrified?
That question really is the ultimate metric of personal responsibility, and that is why the challenge from the text is so incredibly urgent. Identify one area where you have been waiting and take one meaningful action within the next 24 hours. Do not wait for the feeling of confidence to arrive. Build it piece by piece through action.
If you want to join the Victory with Ash community, use the link available in the description.
Thank you for patiently listening to this episode. I appreciate your time, your attention, and your commitment to becoming a better version of yourself. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep moving forward.
Knowledge will draw the map, but only courage will climb the mountain. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Rise and make the moment perfect.